Hi, and welcome to the FedNexus Law Government Contracts Industry Report for the week of November the 3rd. I'm Jennifer Albell. Joining us in studio this week will be consultant Mihan Kim, who will be talking about the new service contract inventory reporting requirements. But first, here are the top government contracting headlines for this week. Since the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, is one piece of legislation that Congress is guaranteed to actually pass every year, you often see some unusual attachments associated with the NDAA, and it looks like fiscal 15 will be no different. First, we're hearing that the House and Senate have finally come to an agreement on the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act, or FITARA, and it will be attached to the 2015 NDAA. FITARA is very significant because it's going to give the chief information officers of federal agencies legislative authority to improve the IT acquisition process. An interesting provision that's appearing in the House version of the NDAA is a prohibition against the use of reverse auctions that currently covers any procurement where small businesses can compete or any opportunity where only one bid is received. In other IT acquisition news, GSA recently awarded Booz Allen Hamilton a $64.5 million contract for the modernization of the integrated acquisition environment. Booz Allen Hamilton now has the unenviable task of modernizing and integrating 10 separate federal acquisition databases to comprise a single consolidated integrated acquisition environment. We're all hoping that Booz Allen has better luck with this project than IBM did with the launch of SAM back in 2012, which resulted in system failures and a lot of angry users. So now we're going to move on to the interview section of our broadcast today. With me in the studio is Mihan Kim, consultant with FedNexus Law, and Mihan wrote a very interesting blog this week on a new reporting requirement for federal contractors that seemed to take a lot of people by surprise. So Mihan, what can you tell us? What do we need to know about the service contract inventory reporting?
Well, thanks for having me, Jennifer. So the Federal Acquisition Regulation Council recently issued a final rule amending the FAR to implement a section of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2010 requiring service contractors for executive agencies, except where the DoD has fully funded the contract, to report certain information annually in support of the agency-level inventories for service contracts.
Okay. So one of the things that you differentiate between in your blog that I think is really important is the difference between a service contract and a Service Contract Act covered contract. So these are not the same thing, are they?
Correct. And we want to make sure that that our listeners understand that this is not for or has anything to do with the Service Contract Act, but like you said, it's for services contracts.
Right. So it's not specific to the SCA, but it's covering, any contract that's got a PSC code that's related to services of any type, right?
Correct.
Okay. So they have some thresholds and some reporting limits that will help contractors identify when they need to do these reports. So can you tell us a little bit about those so contractors will understand what contracts they have that might be covered?
Sure. So on FAR 4.1703 establishes reporting thresholds based on contract type and value, making the annual requirements applicable to all cost reimbursement, time and materials, and labor hour service contracts in orders at or above the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently $150,000. This includes task orders for service awards under the multiple award schedule meeting the threshold. Additionally, the reporting requirements extends to first-tier subcontracts for services under covered contracts.
First-tier subcontracts, I think that a lot of companies that ignored some of those first-tier subcontract reporting requirements that appear in the executive compensation FAR clause are going to be kicking themselves now that they weren't paying a little bit closer attention to who their first-tier subcontractors are.
Yeah, that's, and we don't want to, and we want to make sure that for the service subcontracts, they need to meet the threshold in FAR 4.1703A2.
As well?
Yes, as well.
Okay, so in terms of the value of the subcontract and the type of contract?
Yes, and
Okay.
if they don't meet that threshold, then they don't have to report.
Okay. So where is it that all this awful reporting needs to take place? And I don't think we talked about what has to be reported either. So can you cover both of those things for us?
Sure. So the contractors will be completing the service contract report under SAM, which is the System for Award Management.
Okay.
When you log into SAM and you see the register update entity link on the left-hand side of the page, you click on the service contract reporting link, and then on there you will see a list. Hopefully you will see some pending actions, and your DUNS number will be displayed.
And we haven't been able to confirm or deny that one yet.
No, and we've tried, here logging in, and we didn't see anything, and so that doesn't mean that
that you guys won't out there
Yeah,
listening.
yeah.
But I think what we saw is that it has something to do with what the contracting officer puts into FPDS as well.
Yes.
So
Yes. So it's going to be interesting as far as how that whole process is going to go about, as far as, and I don't even know if the contracting officers themselves in GSA, whether or not they may or may not know the requirements for that. We haven't had any clients here, for those who didn't meet the October 31st deadline, receive any emails from contracting officers. So that'd be interesting to see as well.
yeah, I think that's a pretty fair observation, considering that the notice that GSA did send out about this requirement was 1 week before the deadline, and also inaccurately stated that it only covered SCA covered contracts. So, oops.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it that they have to put into this reporting inventory?
So in accordance with FAR 52.204-15, the contractor shall report annually by October 31st the contract number and order number, and then the total dollar amount invoiced for services performed during the previous government fiscal year under the order, the number of contractor direct labor hours expended on the services performed during previous government fiscal year. And lastly, the data reported by first-tier subcontractors providing services under covered contracts.
I mean, that's not an insubstantial amount of information that you would have to provide. And I think that, especially for GSA schedule holders who aren't on a cost accounting system, it might be difficult for them to get some of that information.
It's going to be extremely difficult. I can't, especially for small businesses who may or may not be able to provide, like you said, those reportings. I mean, how are they going to be able to do that? I just don't.
I've seen some really ugly Excel spreadsheets in people's futures.
A lot of filtering and a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting to see that this didn't get a whole lot of publicity until right up at the deadline. And then, but what can happen if you didn't report and you were supposed to?
So if the contractor fails to submit a report in a timely manner, the contracting officer would exercise or shall exercise appropriate contractual remedies. In addition, the contracting officer shall make the contractor's failure to comply with the reporting requirements a part of the contractor's performance information under FAR subpart 42.15.
So you'll get basically a naughty report on your past performance for not doing this. So it's really good to check out Mihan's blog, and it includes links to the citations and some additional information that will be helpful for contractors who aren't sure if they need to report or what they need to report. We definitely encourage you to take a look at that blog. And thank you for stopping in, Mihan.
Thank you.
And that concludes the Government Contracts Industry Report for this week. I'm Jennifer Albell. Look forward to talking to you next week.